They will all be made to pay. The formal announcement was set for April 29th. 41 people gathered in the Cypress Grove dining room for what the invitations called an important family announcement. The county's elite arrived in carriages. Judge Pelham with his wife Eleanor, Reverend Crenshaw with his daughter, Marcus Fanning and his family, Benjamin Lyle from the bank. The meal was sumptuous. Oysters, roasted duck, several rice dishes, sweet potatoes, fresh bread, and a towering cake for dessert. Through it all, Catherine sat at her father's right hand, eating little, answering only when spoken to, and offering nothing else. Ezekiel served with the other house slaves, moving quietly, refilling glasses, clearing plates. He was invisible to most guests, but he heard every word, watched every exchange, and stored each detail in his mind. After dessert, Silas rose and tapped his glass. "My friends, thank you for joining us. As you know, Catherine has been ill for years. We tried every treatment, doctors from Charleston, a specialist from Philadelphia. Nothing helped until recently." He nodded toward Ezekiel. 2 weeks ago I brought in Ezekiel, who knows herbal medicine. As you can see, Catherine is much improved, clearer, calmer, more herself than in many years. Quiet murmurs moved around the table. Catherine kept her face unreadable, though Ezekiel saw her fingers grip her napkin beneath the table. "This improvement," Silas went on, "has led to a hard decision. Catherine needs care beyond what our home can give. After long thought, I've decided Ezekiel will take full charge of my daughter's welfare. He will have total authority over her treatment, daily life, and where she lives, effective at once." The murmurs shifted into confused whispers. Several guests exchanged looks. Mrs. Pelham looked shocked. Marcus Fanning spoke up. "Silas, I don't follow. You're putting your daughter under a slave's care permanently? I'm placing her with someone who succeeded when others failed. My daughter's health matter, assess more than social rules." "But surely," Reverend Crenshaw said cautiously, "there are other choices, a companion, a nurse, someone more fitting." Silas's face hardened. "I have made my choice. Catherine agrees. Do you not, daughter?" All eyes turned to Catherine. This was the moment she could refuse, could reveal everything, could bring it all down. Instead she smiled, small and controlled, giving nothing away. "I trust my father's judgment. Ezekiel has been kind and his treatments help. I am content with this plan." Perfectly delivered. But Ezekiel saw what others did not, her knuckles white on the napkin, the flash in her eyes promising fury. She played the required part, the obedient daughter, while inside she wanted to scream. The evening passed in strained talk. Some guests left early. Others lingered to speak with Silas privately, asking questions they did not want public. Ezekiel overheard fragments. "Are you sure this is wise? What will people say? The brethren will not approve if this becomes known." That last came low from Judge Pelham near the study. Silas's reply was too quiet to catch, but whatever he said made Pelham nod and pat his shoulder. By midnight, the guests had gone. Catherine went to her room. Silas went to his study. Ezekiel helped tidy up, then climbed the stairs. He knocked softly on Catherine's door. "Come in." She sat by the window, still in her dinner dress, staring out at the dark grounds. She did not turn. "It is done, then. You are officially my responsibility." "Property of property," she said, bitter. "How absurd. How do you feel, miss?" "I want to burn this house with everyone in it. But we must be patient. Isn't that what you tell me?" "Yes, miss. I agreed because I want them to feel safe. I want them to believe this is just my father's odd choice. I want them to forget me while we work." She faced him. "Did you see their faces? The disgust, the pity. They think I'm weak. They have no idea what we are planning." "And what exactly are we planning, miss?" Catherine moved to her dresser and took out a wooden box. Inside were papers in her hand. "I've been writing everything down for years. Dates, names, ritual notes coded so it looks like nonsense if found. But I can read it. We have enough to ruin 20 men." "And will anyone believe us, miss? A woman recently recovered from madness and an enslaved man." "No, which is why we need proof. They won't dismiss real physical evidence." She pulled out a single page. "I know where they keep their records. The Brethren keeps a ledger of all their acts, every ritual, every sacrifice, and who took part. It ties everyone together. My father mentioned it years ago before he thought I'd remember." "Where is the ledger?" "In the cellar. There's a hidden room beyond the main chamber. I never went in, but I heard them speak of it. That's where they keep what they can't risk losing." Ezekiel felt both hope and fear. Such a ledger would be devastating proof, but taking it meant going into the heart of the Brethren's territory. They'd need to get it when the house was quiet. "My father travels to Charleston monthly," she said. "The next trip is May 14th. He'll be gone 3 days. That gives us 2 weeks to plan. We need the house layout, each room, every hiding place." "I can help. I've thought about this for 16 years. I know exactly what must happen." They spent an hour whispering over details. Catherine drew the cellar plan from memory. Ezekiel asked about guards, keys, and slave routines. When he left her room, it was near 2 in the morning. He went to his small room, mind racing. He was fully in now, conspirator with a woman who was brilliant, wounded, and terrifying. He pulled out the paper with his family's names and read it by candlelight. "I am doing this for you, for Sarah, for Benjamin, for Ruth, for everyone who suffered because men like Silas Rutledge think power lets them ruin lives." He blew out the candle and lay in the dark, listening to the house settle. Somewhere below were secrets that could break South Carolina's most powerful families. In 2 weeks, he would go down there to find them. The 2 weeks passed with deceptive calm. Catherine kept improving. She lost weight. Her mind stayed keen. She walked farther each day. More importantly, she translated her coded journals for Ezekiel, filling in details about the Brethren that made his blood run cold. The Brethren was not just in Colleton County. It was part of a wider network across the South. Groups in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Richmond. Different names, same pattern. Wealthy men who claimed their power came from old practices of dominance and sacrifice. They believed they continued traditions from long ago. Catherine explained one afternoon. European mystery cults mixed with knowledge taken from enslaved people, twisted into something monstrous, a justification for things with no justification. The sacrifices were not always human, sometimes animals, but other times they took people who wouldn't be missed, slaves without family, poor whites who wandered onto their lands. "Once I heard my father mention a child," she said, "but I don't know if that was literal." "Where do bodies go?" Ezekiel asked. "Swamps on every plantation. Bodies vanish. Alligators do the rest." And the ledger records it all. Every ritual for 40 years, names, dates, notes. They keep it so everyone is guilty. No one can expose the others without destroying themselves. May 14th came. Silas left for Charleston early with his carriage and manservant. He'd stay with associates, handle business, and return the evening of May 16th. That left almost 3 full days. They waited until night. By 10, the main house was quiet. They met in Catherine's room. She wore plain, dark clothes for movement, hair tied back tight, looking like someone ready for battle. "Are you certain, miss?" "I've never been more certain. Let's go." The cellar entrance was in the kitchen behind the pantry. The door looked like paneling, but push the right spot and it clicked open, revealing narrow stairs down into darkness. The smell hit them, damp earth, old smoke, and something rotten. "You get used to it," Catherine said. I wish I could say you stopped smelling it, but I'd be lying. They went down slowly, Ezekiel with a shuttered lantern giving little light. The stairs were steep and worn. After 20 steps, they reached the bottom. The cellar was bigger than expected, maybe 30 feet square with low beams. The floor was packed earth, and the stone walls wept moisture. In the center was what Catherine called the altar, now a heavy wooden table stained dark with grooves carved around its edges. Around the room were candle holders, clay jars sealed with wax, wooden boxes, a rack of black robes trimmed with crimson. One wall held shelves of books and papers. Catherine moved like someone following a remembered map. She led Ezekiel to a far wall and pressed a certain stone. It clicked, and a section swung inward, revealing a smaller chamber. 10 feet square, this was where the Brethren kept its deepest secrets. The ledger sat on a wooden stand in the middle. Huge, about 2 feet tall and 18 inches wide, bound in dark leather with metal clasps. Beside it were smaller journals and jars on shelves that Ezekiel dared not look at too closely. "That is what we need," Catherine whispered, pointing. Ezekiel went to the stand and opened the book with care. The pages were thick parchment filled with neat handwriting, names and dates reaching back to 1800. Ritual notes read like clinical reports rather than confessions. He read, and with each entry his horror grew. This was not occasional cruelty, it was system. Regular gatherings every 6 weeks, rituals linked to planting cycles, because they thought blood fed the land. They had killed at least 37 people over the years, probably more, mostly enslaved people, but also poor whites and indigenous people, anyone vulnerable. There were notes about consumption. They had not only killed, they had eaten. Pieces of victims prepared in specific ways, consumed during ritual meals that they believed gave power. "Dear God," Ezekiel whispered, "this is worse than I thought." "I watched them when I was 12, Catherine said flatly. "I watched them cut from that woman on the altar. I watched my father raise a cup and drink. Then I spent 16 years told I was mad, that I imagined it. But I knew. I always knew." Ezekiel turned pages to find entries about his family. He found them. October 1838, 3 lines. Purchased family unit from Virginia. Woman, Sarah. Children, Benjamin and Ruth. Separated from male to show resolve. Sent to Alabama contact. Payment received. 3 lines. That was all his family's ruin deserved. "We must take this," Ezekiel said, voice tight with rage. "No." Catherine's hand on his arm. "If we take it now, they will know at once. We need to copy the key entries first." She was right. Ezekiel wanted to burn it all, but revenge required patience and being smarter than the enemy. They worked 3 hours. Catherine had paper and ink. She copied entries about certain rituals and named current members. Ezekiel listed victims, building a roster that might be checked against other records. The work was draining, and the content made it worse. Several times Ezekiel had to stop, his hands trembling. Once Catherine left the chamber overcome by memory, but slowly they built their case, page after page of proof. They were so absorbed they didn't hear footsteps on the cellar stairs. The first sign of danger was a flare of light in the outer chamber, a lantern much brighter than theirs. Ezekiel looked up. His blood went cold. Silas Rutledge stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men, and at least 4 more figures filled the main cellar behind them. "I must admit," Silas said calmly, "I am impressed. I didn't think you'd find the inner room." Catherine rose slowly and put herself between her father and Ezekiel. "You were supposed to be in Charleston." "I was supposed to be, but I never trusted your miraculous recovery. I left this morning, yes, but I came back this afternoon and watched the house all evening to see what you would do." He stepped into the chamber with 2 men blocking the exit. "Did you think I wouldn't foresee this? That I wouldn't prepare for the chance you might remember and seek revenge? You have been poisoning me for 16 years. Catherine's voice stayed steady. And you expect me to accept that? I expect you to see it was necessary. You saw something you should not have as a child. You couldn't understand. I couldn't let you ruin everything. I was 12, and I watched you kill a woman and eat her flesh. That was not fear, Father. That was a reasonable reaction to witnessing evil. Evil? Silas's voice was cold. He moved further in, eyes flicking between Catherine and Ezekiel. And you, using my daughter to get at me, filling her mind with revenge. Ezekiel said nothing, measuring distance and odds. 7 men against 1, with Catherine unfit to fight. The odds seemed hopeless. Silas read his thought. Don't do anything foolish. I don't want to hurt either of you, not permanently, but I won't have this rebellion continue. He gestured to the men behind him. Bring them upstairs. We must decide what happens next. They were taken to Silas's study and locked together inside. The room had no normal windows, only a high transom out of reach. The door was heavy oak and locked from outside. As soon as they were alone, Catherine moved to Ezekiel. Are you hurt? No, miss, but we're in deep trouble. Yes, but not as much as you think. She pulled something from her dress, the papers they'd been copying. I kept these. He didn't search me. Too confident. That won't help if we're dead. We are not dying. Not tonight. Catherine's eyes were sharp. My father will want to settle this without killing me if he can. I am still his daughter. That is leverage. Over the next hour they heard men arrive in the hall, voices, the brethren assembling. Finally, the door opened. Marcus Fanning stood there, face grim. They are ready for you. Come quietly, and you will not be harmed. They were led down to the cellar again. This time the main chamber had been changed. All 13 brethren members were present in ritual robes. Candles burned in every holder. The altar was covered with crimson cloth. 13 chairs formed a perfect circle. All were filled, except Silas's at the head. Ezekiel and Catherine were forced into the center, standing before Silas. The others watched, expressions from curious to hostile. Silas removed his hood. Brothers of the harvest, thank you for coming on short notice. We face a crisis. My daughter and her helper found our inner chamber. They saw the ledger. They were copying entries when I caught them. Judge Pelam spoke first. Then they must be silenced for good. This is simple. I disagree, someone murmured. Silas raised a hand. My daughter is blood. I cannot simply dispose of her without exhausting options, and the man is an opportunity. What opportunity? Reverend Crenshaw asked. To test something I've long believed, that a person can be drawn into our work by their own choices if guided right. Silas turned to Ezekiel. You want revenge on me. You want to destroy me for what I did to your kin. I get that. But what if I offer a different kind of revenge, a more powerful one? I do not understand, Ezekiel said carefully. I offer you membership, not equal, since the Brethren does not accept men of color as full members, but as an associate. You would come to our gatherings and take part in rituals. In return, I give you what you want most. My family is gone. You cannot give me that. No. But I can give you revenge on those who killed them. The plantation owner in Alabama who worked your wife and children to death. His name is Edward Gaines. He is not protected by us. If you join, prove your loyalty, and I will give you the means to ruin him. Money, information, anything you need to make him pay. The offer hung obscene in the air. Join the men who destroyed your family to get revenge on another monster. And if I refuse, then you and Catherine die tonight. Your bodies go to the swamp. No one will know. The papers you copied will be burned. Your journals destroyed. Everything goes on as before. Silas spread his hands. If you accept, you live. Catherine lives. You get revenge. All it costs is your soul." Ezekiel looked to Catherine. Her face was white, but she gave him the slightest shake. "Don't do it. Whatever happens, don't become them." But Ezekiel thought of joining, to get inside them, gather more proof, buy time. He stared back at Silas and Catherine. What happens to her? She returns to her room, resumes her medicines, forgets what she saw. The other option is she dies with you. No. Catherine's voice echoed across the chamber. "I will not forget again. I will not be silenced. Kill me if you must, Father, but I will not pretend I do not know what you are." Silas's face hardened. "Then you have made your choice." Zero by Zoo. In April 1841, Silas Rutledge made a choice that shocked even the hardest plantation owners in South Carolina. He placed his daughter Catherine, a 28-year-old woman weighing over 260 lb, under the full authority of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross, not as a nurse, not as a companion, as her owner in every real sense except on paper. The white society of Colleton County was outraged, but they had no idea what Rutledge was actually doing or what Ezekiel Cross would do to Catherine in the months that followed. By November, Catherine's body had changed in ways nobody could explain. 13 men were dead, and Cypress Grove Plantation lay in ashes. What truly happened between that enslaved man and the plantation owner's daughter? What did he do that terrified everyone who saw it? Before we reveal the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Now, let me take you back to where it began. 4. Spring in Colleton County arrived with heavy heat and humidity that made the air feel thick. The Combe River moved slowly through the low country, its dark water reflecting Spanish moss that hung from live oaks like funeral drapes. Rice fields stretched for miles, flooded and tended by hundreds of enslaved people who worked with water up to their knees from dawn until dusk. This was wealth pulled from suffering, prosperity built on human misery. All of it was justified by men who told themselves that cruelty was simply the natural order. Cypress Grove Plantation sat on 800 acres of fairly productive land. Its owner, Silas Rutledge, wasn't part of the top tier, but he wanted to be. He owned 58 enslaved people, which made him rich by many measures, but only mid-range in local society. The truly powerful families owned thousands of acres and hundreds of enslaved people. They spent summers in Charleston and sent their children to schools in the North. Their names opened doors or ruined reputations with a single whisper, 205. Silas had married Elizabeth Yancey in 1812, a match that brought him some land and a respected last name. Elizabeth was practical and kept careful records. She seemed more interested in profit than social climbing. She died giving birth in 1813 to a daughter named Catherine. For 28 years, Silas raised Catherine alone while he worked to push himself into the county's inner circles. He was tall and thin in the way of men who forgot to eat when driven by obsession. His hair had gone gray early, giving him a severe look to match his cold nature. In business, he was known as sharp, but basically honorable, the kind of man who drove hard bargains but kept his word. Catherine grew up cut off, taught by tutors, never fitting in anywhere. By 1841, she was 28 and weighed nearly 260 lb. Her body had swollen after years of medicines prescribed by doctors who labeled her with hysteria and nervous problems. She had violent fits where she screamed and threw things. She had attacked her father with a letter opener the year before, leaving a scar across his left hand. The white society of Colleton County whispered about her with fake pity. Poor Silas Rutledge, stuck with a mad daughter. What a shame. She had been so pretty as a child. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew what Catherine had seen long ago, or that her so-called madness was really a reasonable response to living with monsters. A letter arrived on April 7th, delivered by private courier. Silas opened it in his study, expecting business news. Instead, he found 3 pages on expensive paper sealed with red wax and a symbol he recognized at once, a sickle crossed with wheat stalks, the mark of the Brethren of the Harvest. The Brethren were 13 men who met in darkness to perform rituals they believed made the land stronger through blood offerings. They mixed old European customs with ideas taken from enslaved people who believed in spirits and power. They thought the strong were meant to take from the weak, even literally when needed. Silas had been initiated in 1822. He had attended maybe 40 gatherings over 19 years, taking part in rituals that ran from odd to monstrous. The letter told him he was in debt. $12,000 from years of gambling losses and bad investments, an impossible sum. Repayment would mean selling most of his land and all his enslaved people, wiping out everything he'd built. But the letter offered another choice, a show of commitment for members. In tough spots, Silas would place his daughter Catherine under the full control of one of his enslaved men, not as punishment or briefly, but as a real transfer of authority for a whole year. The enslaved man would have total control over her body, her daily life, her care. Silas would announce it publicly at a meeting of the county's leading families, calling it an extreme medical measure for his daughter's condition. The humiliation would be complete. In a society where white women were supposed to be prized and shielded, Silas would be saying his daughter was worth less than his property. But if he agreed, his debt would be wiped away, and the Brethren would provide funds to restore his standing. Silas sat in his study for hours that night. He weighed his options. Bankruptcy would ruin him. The Brethren had ties to every judge, every lawyer, every politician in the area. They could make him disappear if he caused trouble. Or he could sacrifice his daughter's dignity to save himself, the choice society had taught him to make. Property over people, power over right. He wrote his acceptance by candlelight and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter came with a name and short history: Ezekiel Cross, age 33. Bought recently through a middleman from a Virginia plantation. Skills, carpentry, and herbal knowledge. Temperament, quiet and obedient. What the letter didn't say was that Ezekiel had been picked for this job, that his coming to Cypress Grove was planned, and that he carried his own burning need for justice and the patience to wait for the right moment. Ezekiel arrived on April 13th in a wagon driven by a slave trader named Henderson. The wagon went straight to the big house, odd because most slave sales happened near the barns. Silas came onto the porch, shading his eyes from the morning sun. In the wagon bed sat Ezekiel. The first thing Silas noticed was his eyes. Most enslaved people kept their gaze low to survive, but Ezekiel looked right at Silas, calm and measuring. It made Silas uneasy. Ezekiel stood tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders and lean muscle from hard work. His skin didn't bear whipping scars. His clothes were plain but clean. His hands were large and calloused, but his fingers had a careful skill that suggested real craft. Henderson climbed down and handed papers to Silas. Ezekiel Cross, as requested. Previous owner said he was quiet but able. Your associates want you to know this one was chosen carefully. Silas hardly looked at the papers. He spoke to Ezekiel directly. You know why you're here? Yes, sir. Ezekiel's voice was low and steady with a slight Virginia drawl. My daughter is unwell. You will be responsible for her care. Doctors have failed. You say you know herbal treatments. My grandmother was a healer, sir. She taught me before I was sold. The sale finished quickly. Ezekiel was shown to a small cabin near the main house, separate from other slave quarters. He got basic supplies and was told his duties began the next day. His sole job was Catherine's care and failure would have severe consequences. Ezekiel nodded and said, "Yes, sir." Then he was left alone. For the first time since arriving, his face changed, his jaw loosened, and his shoulders relaxed. He sat on the bed and took from inside his shirt a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped it gently, revealing a worn paper with 3 names written in a child's shaky hand: Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth, his wife, his son, his daughter. Sold away from him 3 years earlier to a plantation in Alabama known for working people to death. He learned they all died within 18 months. Sarah from untreated fever, Benjamin from an injury that became infected, Ruth from simply giving up, a 6-year-old who stopped eating because she couldn't comprehend why her family had been torn apart. And Silas Rutledge had been the man who sold them. Not because he needed the money, or because they had done anything wrong, but to show the brethren he could make cruel choices without feeling. He had split a family like kindling. Ezekiel had spent 2 years working his way south, getting sold from place to place, always learning. He heard whispers about the brethren. He learned about their rituals and their members. He learned they thought themselves above consequence. When the chance came to be sold to Rutledge, Ezekiel knew it was his moment. He would have access to Rutledge's house, to secrets and weak spots. Sometimes justice didn't come from courts, but from patience, planning, and being willing to become as monstrous as needed. He folded the paper with the 3 names and tucked it away. Then he stared at the ceiling and began to plan. His first day began on April 14th. A house slave named Judith, middle-aged with gray hair, brought him to Catherine's room on the 2nd floor. She knocked slowly. "Miss Catherine, your father has brought someone to help with your treatments." A crash from inside, something heavy hitting the wall. Then Catherine's voice, slurred but sharp. "I do not want more treatments. Send him away." Judith looked at Ezekiel with pity. "She has bad days. This is one." Ezekiel opened the door and stepped in, closing it so Judith couldn't follow. The room was large but dark. Heavy curtains were drawn. The air was stale, smelling of unwashed bedding and something else, the sweet rot of mercury. Books lay across the floor, a broken picture against the wall, clothes everywhere. Catherine sat in a chair by the cold fireplace, wrapped in a stained robe. Her dark hair hung loose and tangled. Her face was puffy, eyes unfocused. Her hands trembled on the chair arms. She looked at Ezekiel with confusion, then fear, then anger. "Who are you?" "I said no more doctors. I am not a doctor, miss. My name is Ezekiel. Your father asked me to help you." "Help?" She laughed bitterly. "That is what they all say. Help, treatment, medicine. They mean poison. They mean chains. They mean silence." She stood up swaying. "I know what this is. He is punishing me again for remembering, for speaking, for refusing to forget." Ezekiel stayed calm and non-threatening. "What are you supposed to forget?" The question stopped her. Her anger flickered into something more fragile. "You do not know." "I know nothing, miss, only that your father says you're unwell." Catherine looked at him as if truly seeing him for the first time. "You are not from here." "Virginia originally, miss. Do you know what happens in this house? What they do in the cellar?" Ezekiel's pulse sped, but he kept a steady face. "I do not know what you mean." "Liar. No heat in it. Just exhaustion. Everyone lies. It is easier than truth." She sat down hard. "Leave me alone. Tell my father his newest torment failed." But Ezekiel moved to the window and pulled open the curtains. Sunlight poured in. Catherine cried out and covered her eyes. "When did you last go outside, miss? I cannot walk that far. I'm too weak. When did you last eat without laudanum? The medicine is needed. Doctors say so. What if the doctors are wrong?" Her hands dropped from her eyes. She looked at him with hope and fear mixed. "What did you say?" Ezekiel turned from the window. This was the moment, the first move. I said, "What if the doctors are wrong? What if everything you've been told about your condition is meant not to help you, but to keep you controllable? What if your father has been poisoning you for years so you'll never be well enough to speak about what you saw?" Absolute silence. Catherine's eyes widened and her trembling hands stilled. For 30 seconds she just sat, her mind racing. When she spoke, her voice was different, clearer. "He told you. Your father told me nothing, miss. But I have eyes. I know mercury poisoning. I know long-term drug use. Healthy women do not become like this without someone working hard to make them that way." "Why would you say this?" Suspicion returned. "This is a trick. You are testing me. I'm telling you, I can help you get truly well, clear-minded, strong enough to walk out of this room. But it will not be easy. Your body has grown used to those medicines for years. Stopping will be painful. You will feel worse before you feel better, and your father will not agree." "Then why would you do it?" Ezekiel met her eyes. "Because I have my own reasons for wanting Silas Rutledge to suffer. And the best way to hurt him is to give him back a daughter who is sane enough to remember everything and brave enough to speak about it. The truth is dangerous to say out loud." Catherine was damaged, not dumb. She would see through tricks, but she might believe a real common purpose. "You want revenge on my father?" "Yes, miss. What did he do to you?" "He sold my family, my wife and 2 children, sent them to their deaths to prove something to men who measure worth by cruelty." Catherine took this in, then nodded slowly. "The brethren. He sold them for the brethren." Not a question. "The brethren, miss, you do not know." She laughed, something manic in it. "You will learn. Everyone learns eventually." She leaned forward. "If I agree, if I let you help me, what happens then? You get well, miss. And when you are well, we decide what to do next. I have my revenge to plan. You have yours. Maybe they line up." Catherine studied him closely. Finally she said, "I want them all dead. My father, Judge Pelham, Reverend Crenshaw, every man who stood in that cellar. I want them to suffer first, to know it is coming and beg, and then I want them dead." The venom shocked him, not because it was strong, but because it came from someone written off as mad and harmless. This was not madness. This was rage shaped by years of being crushed. Ezekiel nodded. "Then we have an understanding, Miss Catherine. If we are conspirators, use my name." "I cannot, miss. Not where anyone might hear. We must be careful." "Then know this, Ezekiel." Catherine's eyes shone dangerously. "I have killed before 3 people, house slaves, who might have told my father about my clear moments. I cannot remember exactly how. The laudanum blurs everything, but I know I did it. They vanished. Their families were told they ran away." She smiled horribly. "So if you plan to betray me, to use me, then get rid of me. Know that I am not a victim. I am something worse." Ice ran down Ezekiel's spine. He had expected an ally, not someone whose ability for violence might be greater than his, but he stayed steady. "I believe you, miss, and I will not betray you." "Good." Catherine stood firmer. "Then let us begin. But I have one condition. When this is done, when we have had our revenge, I want to die. I do not want to live with what I have seen and done. You will help me with that too." Agreed. Ezekiel had not expected that, but now he was committed. Agreed. "Then we have a deal." Catherine held out her hand. After a pause, Ezekiel shook it. Her grip was stronger than he guessed. Over the next week, Ezekiel began Catherine's treatment. He slowly cut her laudanum, replacing some doses with herbal tinctures, valerian root for anxiety and sleep, chamomile for digestive trouble, milk thistle to help her liver process built-up poisons. The process was brutal. Catherine spent 3 days in bed with fever, shaking, and vomiting. Ezekiel stayed with her through it, holding a basin while she was sick, wiping her face with cool cloths, speaking softly to remind her she was not alone. When the worst passed, she was weak but clearer than she had been in years. The constant tremor eased. Her speech was less slurred. She could focus enough to read. Then real work began. Ezekiel had her walk short distances at first from her room to the hallway and back. It wore her out, but he pushed a little farther each day. He changed her diet, bringing lean meats and vegetables instead of heavy pastries. He strictly limited portions, though she fought him. Years of using food as comfort made that hard. While working on her body, they talked. Catherine told him about the cellar, about what she saw long before. She described it in enough detail to make Ezekiel's stomach turn, but he listened without interrupting. She told him about years of being gaslighted, her father convincing everyone, even her, that she was mad, that she made up memories, that nothing she said could be trusted. She told him about a hidden journal she kept, pages listing dates and times when her father left late, names of visitors at odd hours, and sounds from below that should not be possible. Ezekiel told her about his family, Sarah, who sang while working and taught their children to read despite the danger, Benjamin, who at 8 could do math that amazed overseers, Ruth, who loved flowers and picked wild blooms to make their cabin pretty. He told her how Silas arrived at the Virginia plantation with a buyer's warrant, how he inspected them like livestock, how he agreed to buy all 3 at first, then changed terms at the last moment, saying he only needed the woman and children, not Ezekiel, how he split the family for no reason except that he could. He even smiled when he did it. Ezekiel said softly, "That is what I remember most. My son crying, holding my leg, begging, my wife trying to be strong, telling Benjamin to be brave, and your father smiling like it pleased him to cause that pain." Catherine listened with newly clear eyes. "I am sorry. I know sorry is just a word. But I am sorry you suffered because of what my father is. You are not to blame for what he does, miss. No, but I am responsible for what I do next. And I promise you, Ezekiel, he will pay for what he took from you." In the humid lowlands of Burke County, Georgia, 1852, Master Elijah Thornwood stood on the veranda of Ironwood Plantation, surveying what he believed was his greatest creation. It wasn't the 2,000 acres of rich cotton land, nor the 300 enslaved people who worked his fields, nor even the grand Greek revival mansion that matched any in the state. His pride rested on something far more unsettling, a carefully planned breeding project involving his 3 unmarried daughters and selected enslaved men chosen for their strength and obedience. Elijah's obsession with bloodlines had started decades earlier after hearing about so-called experiments by other planters who believed they could create a superior generation of workers. He took that cruel idea further, twisting it into a vision where he would blend what he saw as the best of African endurance and European intellect. He thought of himself as a man of science, not cruelty, and justified everything as progress. His journal entries often mixed scripture and pseudoscience, describing his intentions as guided by divine selection. The Thornwood daughters, Margaret, Lucille, and Clara, had been raised with strict discipline and rare affection. They were trained to play piano, speak French, and manage the plantation accounts, but each carried the quiet burden of their father's control. After their mother died during Clara's birth, Elijah's authority became total. By 1852, when Margaret turned 23, whispers among the enslaved spread about strange new orders being given near the slave quarters. It was Ezekiel, an older house servant, and the closest thing the Thornwood sisters had to an ally, who first realized what Elijah was planning. He had served the family since childhood and had seen cruelty in many forms, but nothing like this. Late one evening, while fetching brandy from Elijah's study, Ezekiel overheard his master discussing with Dr. Harlan, a local physician with similar twisted ideas about human improvement. The plan was to use select enslaved men to impregnate the Thornwood daughters and to record the results like livestock breeding. Ezekiel moved carefully after that night, protecting the sisters in small ways, delaying orders, misplacing messages, and offering quiet warnings whenever possible. But the day soon came when Elijah summoned Margaret to his office. The conversation was short and cold. He told her she would serve the future of Ironwood, and that obedience was her Christian duty. Her protest was met with silence and the sound of his hand striking the desk. That night, Margaret sat in her room staring out the window, tears falling onto the open pages of her mother's Bible. The chosen man was Solomon, a blacksmith known for his calm strength and intelligence. He was respected among the enslaved community, often the one others turned to for help. When Elijah called him to the big house, Solomon feared punishment, but what he heard left him speechless. He was told he would join with Miss Margaret under God's plan. When he refused, Elijah had him locked in the workshed without food for 2 days. He was told that if he resisted again, his family would be sold. In the end, Solomon's consent was taken from him as completely as Margaret's. The cabin used for the acts stood behind the slave quarters, reachable by a private path. Margaret was the first to be ordered there, chosen because as the eldest, she would be expected to lead her sisters into compliance. What happened in that cabin over the following months was experienced differently by both of them. For Margaret, it was systematic violation disguised as duty, endured with the same grim determination she used to manage plantation accounts. For Solomon, it was forced participation in the violation of a woman who had no real choice. Weighed down by shame and fury, he had to hide behind silence. Clara, the youngest, was 17 when her father told her it was time. She had grown up watching her sisters change, their laughter replaced by quiet fear. When her moment came, she tried to run but was caught by overseers before reaching the river. The man chosen for her, Nathan, was barely 20, terrified and confused. They both cried through the ordeal, 2 children forced into a nightmare neither had asked for. By 1856, all 3 sisters had borne children. Margaret gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Lucille had 1 daughter, and Clara died during childbirth along with her baby. Elijah recorded everything in his journals, birth weights, eye colors, physical strength, as though cataloging farm animals. Months later, the remaining people were sent to different plantations as Cypress Grove was shut down. They spread across South Carolina and beyond, taking their secrets with them to their graves. The years went by. The last ruins of Cypress Grove were finally torn down, the land was sold, and new buildings were raised on its ashes. Life, as always, moved forward, covering the past with the dust of the present. Yet the whispers never stopped. In the slave quarters, people still told stories late at night about the plantation where the masters burned. About that one night when justice finally came for men who had believed they could never be touched. About the woman and the man who brought that night to pass. The details shifted over time, changing a little with each telling until the tale became legend, became myth. But its heart never changed. It still carried the truth that cruelty has consequences, that no power lasts forever, and that even the helpless can rise and find strength. In 1863, during the Civil War, Union soldiers took control of the land where Cypress Grove once stood. They found signs of tunnels running beneath the property, uncovered bones in the swamp nearby, and noticed strange carvings on trees that hinted at old rituals. But the war moved quickly, and no one stayed long enough to look deeper. More than 100 years later, in 1971, while workers were tearing down an old structure on that land, they discovered a journal hidden inside a wall. It described everything: names, dates, ceremonies, victims. But as Catherine had once warned, it was written in a secret code. Before anyone could completely translate it, the journal vanished from the county archives. Some said it was destroyed to hide the truth. Others whispered that it was taken by the descendants of the old Brethren families to guard their ancestors' secrets. A few still believe that the journal survives somewhere, waiting for the right time to be uncovered. What is known for sure is this: 13 well-known men died in a fire in 1841. Catherine Rutledge disappeared soon afterward, though no body was ever officially found. A man named Ezekiel Cross, once enslaved, was said to have been sold to a plantation in Alabama, but there is no record that the sale ever took place. For many years after that, stories spread through enslaved communities about a secret group helping people escape, led by a man who had faced true evil and survived. Whether those stories were real or just dreams passed from one voice to another, no one can say for certain. But sometimes truth doesn't live in written history. It lives in what people remember, in the tales they pass down, in the justice they hold in their hearts when the world tries to forget. This mystery reminds us that power born of cruelty is never as strong as it appears, that secrets kept in darkness always find a way to the light, and that those seen as powerless often hold the most dangerous power of all: the power to witness, the power to remember, the power to never let the truth be buried. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was truly revealed? Do you think that hidden journal is still out there, waiting to be found? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this story and want to hear more dark mysteries from history, subscribe to Liturgy of Fear. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a new tale, and share this video with someone who loves stories that blur the edge between history and horror. These stories deserve to live on. These voices deserve to be heard. See you in the next video. He wrote of promising results and planned further generations. The surviving children were kept close, educated by private tutors, and taught to forget the circumstances of their births. When the Civil War broke out, Ironwood became a target for Union soldiers. Elijah, refusing to abandon his research, was killed defending the estate. The freed people burned the slave quarters, but spared the main house at Margaret's request. After the war, she took control of Ironwood, freed those who remained, and allowed them to live as paid workers. But she never forgave herself or her father's memory. Lucille left the plantation soon after, moving north and never returning. Margaret stayed behind, raising the children as her own, though the truth of their parentage haunted every corner of the house. She continued her father's habit of keeping journals, but hers told the truth of violation, loss, and the endurance of those who suffered in silence. Those journals were sealed away in a locked chest under the floorboards of her mother's room. Margaret lived until 1893, maintaining detailed diaries that documented the hidden history of Ironwood. She instructed her descendants to keep them sealed for 50 years after her death, believing that the world needed time before it could bear the truth. When the journals were finally opened in 1943, they revealed a story not only of one family's horror, but of an entire society's blindness, where progress and cruelty had walked hand in hand under the same roof. Months later, the remaining people were sent to different plantations as Cypress Grove was shut down. They spread across South Carolina and beyond, taking their secrets with them to their graves. The years went by. The last ruins of Cypress Grove were finally torn down. The land was sold and new buildings were raised on its ashes. Life, as always, moved forward, covering the past with the dust of the present. Yet the whispers never stopped. In the slave quarters, people still told stories late at night about the plantation where the masters burned, about that one night when justice finally came for men who had believed they could never be touched, about the woman and the man who brought that night to pass. The details shifted over time, changing a little with each telling until the tale became legend, became myth. But its heart never changed. It still carried the truth that cruelty has consequences, that no power lasts forever, and that even the helpless can rise and find strength. In 1863, during the Civil War, Union soldiers took control of the land where Cypress Grove once stood. They found signs of tunnels running beneath the property, uncovered bones in the swamp nearby, and noticed strange carvings on trees that hinted at old rituals. But the war moved quickly, and no one stayed long enough to look deeper. More than 100 years later, in 1971, while workers were tearing down an old structure on that land, they discovered a journal hidden inside a wall. It described everything: names, dates, ceremonies, victims. But as Catherine had once warned, it was written in a secret code. Before anyone could completely translate it, the journal vanished from the county archives. Some said it was destroyed to hide the truth. Others whispered that it was taken by the descendants of the old brethren families to guard their ancestors' secrets. A few still believe that the journal survives somewhere, waiting for the right time to be uncovered. What is known for sure is this: 13 well-known men died in a fire in 1841. Catherine Rutledge disappeared soon afterward, though no body was ever officially found. A man named Ezekiel Cross, once enslaved, was said to have been sold to a plantation in Alabama, but there is no record that the sale ever took place. For many years after that, stories spread through enslaved communities about a secret group helping people escape, led by a man who had faced true evil and survived. Whether those stories were real or just dreams passed from one voice to another, no one can say for certain. But sometimes, truth doesn't live in written history. It lives in what people remember, in the tales they pass down, in the justice they hold in their hearts when the world tries to forget. This mystery reminds us that power born of cruelty is never as strong as it appears, that secrets kept in darkness always find a way to the light, and that those seen as powerless often hold the most dangerous power of all, the power to witness, the power to remember, the power to never let the truth be buried. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was truly revealed? Do you think that hidden journal is still out there, waiting to be found? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this story and want to hear more dark mysteries from history, subscribe to Liturgy of Fear. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a new tale, and share this video with someone who loves stories that blur the edge between history and horror. These stories deserve to live on. These voices deserve to be heard. See you in the next video.